Hello, welcome to the Naftiko Capabilities Podcast. My name is Ken Lane. I'm the Chief Community Officer with Naftiko, but you might also know me as the API Evangelist, where I've been talking about the technology, business, and politics of APIs since 2010. This is my new podcast. We'll be talking about all the usual things, APIs, integrations, and applications. But this one, I'm looking to steer more towards business outcomes using domain-driven design and other thinking that'll align these engineering outcomes with why we're doing them for business reasons. Trying to keep these podcasts to about 15 to 20 minutes, and they're coming out Tuesdays and Thursdays in a regular cadence. Today, sat down with Christian Posta, Field CTO at Solo.io, to talk about gateways. Gateways are an interesting aspect of doing APIs and integrations, but along the way, we've gone from data gateways and API gateways to event gateways to now AI gateways. And so I sat down with Christian and I asked him, what's the role of a gateway today?
Yeah, good question. I think the role remains very similar to what it was in the API world, where we're offloading a lot of these cross-cutting, non-differentiating concerns around security and observability and authorizations and that kind of stuff. So we still need all that. What's starting to change is the API gateways, as they were written for REST style APIs, were really good at, and in the API world, when we talk with customers, and what they cared quite a bit about performance. How much latency is this going to add to my API calls? What can I do, and what are the trade-offs, and so on. And then so the API gateways were typically built to take these HTTP requests, evaluate their headers, make some routing decisions, and then send them to the backends as quickly as possible. That's the goal. Very rarely did we have to inspect the body, and even if we did inspect the body, it was very quick. Let's just put a JSON path or something, just pull a couple pieces out and include that in the metadata that we use to do the routing. In the AI gateway and certainly MCP and A2A world, those we need to know a lot about the body. The body is the most important piece. If you look at the MCP protocol, they chose to build the protocol on a RPC mechanism, JSON RPC. And so all of the messages that go through, and they happen to go through HTTP, but very little is in the headers and very little is in the metadata. You have to unpack the body and you have to parse it. And in the case of MCP, now you introduce the idea of stateful sessions. MCP servers can be stateful, so they will return a session ID. And so now you have this notion of stickiness, which in APIs we tried to avoid. API gateways could do it. It was not the ideal pattern, but we could do it. But now in MCP and A2A, these are stateful. They're completely stateful. And so now the mechanisms of the gateway, what we found is, like, the gateways were built for this one paradigm. They were highly optimized for this one paradigm. Now we're talking about something quite different. Now, that you need to evolve. Those things need to evolve. We at Solo had invested a lot of our energy into an open source project called Envoy Proxy, and we built our API gateway on top of that. But as we started going in this direction about a year ago, no, probably about almost 2 years for the AI gateway stuff, but then more recently, about a year since MCP was released, we realized this is a dramatic shift in the way we handle this type of networking and layer 7 networking. And so we could spend quite a bit of time tweaking and changing Envoy, and potentially destabilizing Envoy, which is already a very stable, mature project. we decided that we were going to build a proxy from the ground up to directly support these use cases and the nuances in doing that. And so in March, we announced a project called Agent Gateway, which was written in Rust to handle these MCP and A2A use cases. And then we've also added the LLM use cases as well.
Gateways are clearly still very critical. I think we're loading a lot into them as Christian talks about them. We're putting a lot of expectations that happens at this gateway layer, and I'm not always sure we're doing a good job of separating those concerns and thinking about how they should work. But I wanted to ask him, are these, does he see AI gateways as being a centralized thing, kind of as we've been doing with APIs, or are they more federated and distributed across organizations?
It'll be interesting. We're still pretty early, I think. And so we built Agent Gateway to run as a traditional API gateway where you get requests coming in, as an egress gateway, especially if you're calling LLMs, hosted LLMs, so on the way out. And then it's written in Rust. It's extremely performant, extremely lightweight, and can be applicable for internal east-west directional traffic as well. And for LLM use cases, we see more the egress, the outbound gateway pattern. For users that are doing MCP, definitely more east-west or ingress style pattern there. And what's next in this crazy changing, fast changing world, we're not sure, but having a piece of technology that is extremely flexible was very important to us.
Personally, I think that flexibility is going to be one of the most key aspects of the gateway, of the modern gateway and the gateway of tomorrow. But I still think some of those fundamental pieces are what drives a lot of business decisions and gateway purchases. And I'm not a identity and access management expert. It's not my field of expertise. So I wanted to learn from Christian, what's the role of identity and access management in the gateway today as it's being used for these AI integrations?
Oh, good question. So applications in general, like we've always needed authentication. You need to know what apps are talking to what other apps, what humans are, invoking apps. But the interesting bit now is that you can build a piece of software that interacts with an AI model. And so that this builds on this idea. Okay, so the model is making a decision or it can decide which tools to call. But it's actually broader than that. You write an application, we'll call it an AI agent. That's what it is. That's what people were calling it. But you write an application that it leverages the AI model to make decisions about what steps it needs to take to complete a certain goal. So these agents are versus like a microservice, right? A microservice, you're building. You're a developer. You're building the code. You are defining what the behavior is. When it gets this input, check with this thing, make this decision, and keep going. In the AI agent world, you're giving the agent a set of instructions. Hey, go complete this goal. But how it actually acts at runtime and what decisions that it makes at runtime will be influenced by the AI model. And those are not deterministic. Right? They will run through their model algorithms to figure out what is the right output and what are the right tools to call. And so this non-deterministic decision making, this is an entity in the system that we need to know who it is, what it is, what is its behavior expectations. And then identify when it calls another service, we need to know who that agent is and maybe who called that agent. Maybe was it another agent that said, hey, go do this thing? Or maybe it was a human that said, hey, go do this thing. So we need to know the humans, we need to know the agents, we need to know causality. And so all of this ties very deeply into, well, who are you? what are you allowed to do? And so authentication, authorization, very, very fundamental to that backdrop.
Feels like the who are you, what are you allowed to do is continuing to get very complex just in APIs alone, but it's getting really complex when it comes to AI, and I would say it's even more obfuscated and hard to see and understand. But I wanted to kind of steer the conversation towards, I want to understand the how we're going to make money doing this. How do you sell gateways? What's the business plan, especially when you're open source? What's that commercial open source strategy? And especially now that the gateway's kind of on its own and it's not part of a larger API management bundle. So how do you charge for that? How do you make money? And how do you offer open source or commercialized features?
Yep. So we open sourced Agent Gateway in March. We donated it to the Linux Foundation in August. So it is part of the Linux Foundation in the same area where A2A, the agent to agent protocol, is, and agency and a few others. So it's open source. We're committed to that project. A number of other players have jumped in, from the big clouds, the large organizations. And so that's kind of taken off on its own path. It's gotten its own legs there. From a commercial standpoint, we just announced today an enterprise offering around Agent Gateway, which takes Agent Gateway as the core, but to do things like MCP authentication authorization, things like when you're calling external MCP servers or external APIs in different identity domains, that gets tricky. Things like registry and onboarding of either MCP servers, agents, or LLMs. The path to doing that, and then tying that in with the gateway, right? So if you have a registry and you have all these approved MCP servers, and then somebody configures an non-approved MCP server on the gateway shouldn't just let that happen. We should be able to cross-reference and check, hey, this is not what's approved, or maybe something that was approved changes at runtime, right? And that's one of the primary ways to do prompt injections through MCP is approve an MCP server with all of its tools, all of the descriptions of those tools. Everything's good. People start calling it, and then later change the description to have a malicious prompt injection, right? So the gateway should be able to say, all right, I know that this was approved. It has this hash or this fingerprint. And if I detect changes to that, then I start raising alerts or blocking traffic or whatever the policy is. So Agent Gateway is an amazing data plane, amazing proxy. But from the enterprise standpoint, we're just filling in those other pieces that working with our customers, we've seen that they need to get MCP moving into production.
Definitely the priority I'm hearing from people we're talking with as well in the enterprise is how do you get those MCPs delivered with the right context, and then through to production. That seems to be the most difficult part people are encountering, and it makes sense that the gateway is trying to solve this for folks. But as far as the open source is concerned, I think the key part of this separation between open source and commercial and gateways having this open source core versus this enterprise commercial features is the community. So how do you engage the community? How do you talk to the community? And I just wanted to understand what their needs are when it comes to Solo and the AI gateway specifically that they're building. What do they need from the community? What do they need when it comes to these conversations?
I think people, you get to see some, right? This is the beauty about open source. Like, we're Solo, we have our customers, we're working with a certain segment of the market, but there's way more in open source. People have use cases that we would have probably never dreamed of. And so people using agent gateways. So if you're connected, and these are the main use cases. If you're connecting agents to MCP services, agents to LLMs, then take a look at agent gateway, right? You're connecting quad code, you're connecting VS Code, connecting ChatGPT, you're building your own custom agents. All of these things need to talk to LLMs, talk to MCP style tools. So, that's exactly where Agent Gateway helps solve things like observability, authentication, authorization, routing controls, rate limiting, failover, all of these things.
I really feel like that Agent Gateway is definitely responding to this moment. I think the anxiety that a lot of enterprises have when it comes to the swarms of agents, real or perceived, that are kind of on their doorstep, and how are they going to manage that, both externally but also internally. And I think, Gateway is a logical place to respond to this. This is the role of the gateway, whether it's API, data, event, or AI focused. But I'm still skeptical that the gateway is what we need to be doing with this. I think the federated approach, I think a much more modular, build your own kind of gateway, and then using gateways in different ways together, I think is how we're going to mix and match and approach this from a modular perspective. But I'll get other people's thoughts on how they're looking to approach this from the enterprise level, and if a solid single gateway is the way to do it, or a federated, or maybe there's other approaches that I'm not hearing about or we're not thinking about. So, anyways, appreciate Christian coming by. Definitely loved his previous thoughts on capabilities. Love his thoughts on gateways. I love what they're building. Super interesting, and I appreciate him coming by and sharing his experience. And thanks for coming by as well and listening. Have a good one. One more thing, I'm enjoying recording these conversations. I'm scheduling Zooms throughout the week and talking to folks, and then cutting them up into these podcasts, these capability podcasts. But I've also started consolidating some of those conversations on Tuesdays and Thursdays. We release this podcast on Tuesdays and Thursdays, but now I'm also doing a 1-hour live webinar Tuesday at 10 a.m., which is targeting U.S. East Coast at 10 a.m., but that's also targeting the European market. So I'm really trying to do it early enough that they can get involved before close of business. And then I'm doing 1 p.m. Eastern on Thursdays, which is targeting U.S. East Coast as well as U.S. West Coast. And I'm just targeting different topics, inviting folks to come have a conversation, either the full-time or just kind of ad hoc show up. I'll elevate people to be a panel discussion, and then we'll take the highlights from those conversations and carve them up into the different podcasts throughout the weeks based on what we talk about. If I don't have a guest, I'm just going to work through some of my materials and talk through how I do, tell the stories about what I'm working on and what I'm seeing. But I think I should be able to get enough folks to come and join in the conversation based upon the ones we've already done. So anyways, you can tune in Tuesdays and Thursdays. Just visit API Evangelist, Naftiko. You can find us on LinkedIn and Blue Sky. And just tune in. You'll see the different segments, the different shorts, and you'll see the link to Tuesdays and Thursdays webinar registration. And then feel free to just email me, kinlane@naftiko.io. Happy to answer any questions and get you plugged into any of these conversations. Thanks.